On 5 News, a teenage girl is found guilty of murdering a mother and her daughter. Elizabeth and Katie Edwards were stabbed and smothered by the girl and her boyfriend.
What makes this case even more shocking is that these two were 14 years of age when they planned, committed these callous, senseless and unprovoked attacks.
The killers are believed to be the youngest couple ever convicted of murder in Britain. Also, a rise in the cost of living as inflation jumps to its highest level for almost 2 years. Donald Trump on the campaign trail as his wife hits back at those sex assault allegations.
I believe my husband. I believe my husband. This was all organized from the opposition.
Plus, the pensioner stuck in the bath for 4 days and the Good Samaritan who rescued her.
I look back there and I think, how did I do it?
Hello, welcome to 5 News. I'm Matt Barbett. A teenage couple are facing long sentences for murdering a mother and her daughter in their own home. The couple were just 14 at the time. They can't be named because of their age. But the court heard that in April they meticulously planned their crime before stabbing Elizabeth Edwards and 13-year-old Katie as they slept in Spalding in Lincolnshire. They then took a bath and watched the 4 Twilight films before being arrested. Simon Viger was in Nottingham Crown Court.
Elizabeth Edwards and her daughter Katie were murdered in their own beds, stabbed in the throat and then smothered. The boyfriend and girlfriend who did it were just 14 at the time. This is the Edwards home in Spalding after the murders in April. The boyfriend actually attacked the victims and he admitted 2 counts of murder. The girlfriend had denied those, instead admitting manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. The court heard that even though she didn't hold the knife, the girl was the driving force behind the murders and that she's shown no remorse. The prosecution said that brutality and contempt ooze from every pore. This is the murder weapon. The court heard how afterwards the teenage couple watched 4 Twilight vampire films.
What makes this case even more shocking is that these two were 14 years of age when they planned, committed these callous, senseless and unprovoked attacks on Elizabeth and Katie.
Play again. Play again. No way! Go on.
Elizabeth Edwards was a much-loved school dinner lady and helped with the local choir and drama group.
We had about 18 or 19 children in the choir and she helped with that. And again, she was brilliant because very organised, very committed, never let me down, great with the children, and while I dealt with the music, she dealt with crowd control, if you know what I mean. So she became such a wonderfully committed member of St Paul's, and, you know, she was here every week.
Relatives sobbed as the judge described this as an exceptional case by any standards. It has been harrowing for everyone involved, and one family has been torn apart.
So, Simon, what was the reaction there in court when the verdict was announced?
Well, there were stifled gasps and cries from relatives in the public gallery. Matt, not much emotion from the girl herself, although I did see her a few minutes later wipe away some tears. She had said it was mental illness that made her do it, but a forensic psychiatrist told the court that wasn't the case. It was the intense and toxic relationship between the two that led to this, and they egged each other on once they realised the other person was serious. Why? Well, we perhaps will never know why, but the girl did tell police that she just felt like it. As you said, they're thought to be the youngest couple ever to be convicted of murder, and they will be sentenced next month.
Simon, thanks very much. Now, we've heard plenty of warnings that because of Brexit, the price of things we buy is going to go up. Well, today, new figures show the cost of living is rising, but it's not quite that simple. Last month, inflation jumped sharply to 1%, mainly because of higher costs of clothes, fuel and hotels. The cost of food, though, went down. Our political editor, Andy Bell, has been investigating why.
Shopping in Luton Indoor Market today, where it's probably costing a bit more than this time a year ago, as the official inflation figure is now 1%, the biggest rise in more than 2 years.
Everything is costing more now, anything coming from China, because most of the products are coming from, a lot of things coming from China, and they're costing more money now.
You start liking a product, and I found it with coffee, it goes up the next week and the next week, but I'll still buy it because I like the best coffee.
I've noticed price creeping up as more of a kind of noticed volume kind of going down, like tiny little increments in sort of bottles and stuff that you kind of find just gradually getting it less for the same price.
But surprisingly, it's not food that's caused this rise. It's much more to do with clothing. The price of this kind of shopping has fallen due to a combination of factors.
No doubt that the supermarkets have been cutting prices, probably cutting prices more than prices have been falling in the marketplace, so it's very hard to tell quite how much. So I think there's a small element of that, but I wouldn't overstate it. I think it's really what's happening in the market that's affecting this.
Now, the Office of National Statistics, the official number crunchers, have said there's no explicit evidence yet that the lower value of the pound has fed through into higher prices. But maybe that's going to change. Baba Chahal has a business selling mobility scooters, and he says thanks to the falling pound, the people who supply him are putting their prices up.
These guys here are putting their prices up by 9%. So if we sell that for £1,600 now,
right,
that's going to go up effectively by another £130.
So next month you think people are going to be paying £130 on top of what they pay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I can't afford.
You can't absorb that increase.
No.
Okay.
So it's just a fact of life, and that's Brexit.
We have grown used to very low inflation, but now with our pound buying less from overseas, today may be a warning that those days are over.
And only experts saying that Brexit has nothing to do with those inflation figures, but you do have some news about Brexit for us and whether MPs will get to vote on the deal the government reaches with the European Union.
Yes, Matt, right now the government's fighting a case in the High Court against people who say there has to be a vote in Parliament before Article 50 can be triggered. That's the formal 2-year process for leaving the EU. Now, today, in that High Court case, a lawyer acting for the government has said that it is very likely that MPs will get to vote on the final Brexit deal. And the government has basically confirmed that the lawyer was speaking correctly when he made those comments. Now, it certainly doesn't mean that that vote would come before Article 50 is triggered. It probably doesn't even mean that it would come in time to actually affect the negotiation. It would be much more on a kind of take it or leave it basis at the end of this whole process. But nevertheless, this is the furthest I think the government has ever gone in confirming that MPs will get a vote on the final Brexit deal between the EU and the UK, and therefore that Parliament could, in theory, get the chance to reject such a deal.
Andy, thanks very much. Residents in Mosul in Iraq say so-called Islamic State are using people as human shields as the second day of the operation to retake the city continues. Overnight, the US carried out airstrikes on IS targets, while Kurdish and Iraqi government forces managed to capture several villages on their advance into the city. Humanitarian agencies say they fear that IS will also use chemical weapons to repel coalition fighters. And a French court has rejected attempts by a group of charities to stop the destruction of the migrant camps in Calais. They're set to be dismantled next week because conditions have deteriorated too far. Today, another group of 12 teenagers from the camps have been brought to the UK under the scheme to resettle unaccompanied children. They were people who were mentally ill and went on to kill others, yet the risk they posed was underestimated. That's the criticism levelled at the Sussex Partnership NHS Trust over its care of dangerous patients. The reports found the threats they made weren't taken seriously, and bosses failed to learn lessons that could have prevented some of those deaths. It was prompted by the killing of Donald Locke at the hands of Matthew Daly, as our health correspondent Catherine Jones reports.
I reached out with that, and it went into his arm. And then I reached out with it again, and it went into his body.
This is Matthew Daly, describing how, in the grip of a violent delusion, he stabbed Don Locke to death.
It was just like autopilot. I wasn't thinking, I was just doing.
His case and the cases of all these other mentally ill people who killed have now been examined. The conclusion? The risk they posed to others wasn't taken seriously enough. Roger Goswell killed his wife before taking his own life 9 years ago. Their son says he'd repeatedly begged Sussex Partnership NHS Trust to intervene.
They've said it's predictable, and they've allowed my father to go out and murder my mother. And there's no question, if they would have stepped in, that my mother certainly would never have died that day.
The review of killings involving Sussex Partnership Trust patients found warnings from their families were ignored. The risk several of the patients posed to others was underestimated, even when they made threats to kill, and repeatedly lessons were not learned after a death occurred.
What we want to give an assurance to your viewers is that actually we really mean it. We really want to ensure that the lessons that we can learn will be put in place, and some of that cultural change that needs to happen is already happening within the organisation.
But some families have heard similar assurances from this trust before. Barbara Quelch's son Danny was killed by a man under the trust's care in 2007, a crime not included in this review.
They say that lessons have been learnt and we will stop this happening again. And you think, yeah, that's good. But then within a year, there's another 2 cases. 10 years down the line, it's still happening. Because if the trust were doing their job, they would have stopped this. They would learn to recognise the symptoms of their patients. And that's what they're paid for. That's their job.
Sussex Partnership Trust has apologised for not caring for these patients well enough and hopes by re-examining these cases it has done everything possible to prevent future crimes. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Still to come on the programme. Standing by her man, Melania Trump defends her husband, Donald.
Those words, they were offensive to me and they were inappropriate. And he apologized to me, and I accept his.
And the children learning vital skills that could save someone's life. Those stories and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Now, he may be running for president of the United States, but according to his wife, no less, Donald Trump behaves like a teenager. Melania Trump made the comments as she went on US TV to defend him over his boasts about groping women. She says he was being egged on into making boy talk. Julian Drucker reports.
You want to come up and see me? Huh? You want to come up? Come on. Most beautiful little girl.
It's a presidential race without parallels, but there are moments of old-style campaigning. At a rally in Wisconsin, Donald Trump displayed his lesser-seen, warmer side.
Beautiful person you are. Thank you, honey. Come here.
He invited children to join him on stage. And as he did this, another key part of the strategy to rebuild his battered image was being deployed. In a series of interviews, his wife Melania poured scorn on the women accusing her husband of sexual assault.
I believe my husband. I believe my husband. This was all organized from the opposition. And with the details that they go, did they ever check the background of these women? They don't have any facts.
Just kidding. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it.
For the first time, Mrs. Trump addressed the recently leaked footage from 2005, in which her husband made lewd comments.
Those words, they were offensive to me, and they were inappropriate. And he apologized to me, and I accept his apology. And we are moving on. He was lead on, like egg on, from the host to say dirty and bad stuff.
You feel the host, Billy Bush, was sort of egging him on?
Yes.
So what's keeping Mr. Trump from entering the White House? He now claims the Democrats are fraudulently fixing the result.
They even want to try to rig the election at the polling booths. And believe me, there's a lot going on. Do you ever hear these people? They say there's nothing going on. People that have died 10 years ago are still voting. Illegal immigrants are voting.
It's a line of attack he's expected to use in the final TV debate in just over 24 hours' time. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
Now, we've all seen it on TV and in the movies, but would you know how to do CPR in real life? Do you even know what it stands for? Cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Well, new research shows that more than half of adults have never had any life-saving CPR training, and it's estimated that because of poor training levels, 1 in 8 heart attack victims die before emergency services can arrive. That means as many as 10,000 people are dying needlessly every year. Well, the British Heart Foundation says the key is teaching it early. Olivia Kinsley's been meeting pupils at a school that's taking part in the new training.
Can you hear me?
This could be the most important lesson she ever has. The girls at Prendergast School are learning CPR, but in a life-threatening situation, many of us wouldn't know how.
That time when someone has a cardiac arrest, if you don't get CPR almost immediately, your survival chances are very, very slim. So it's vital that people step in to do CPR.
And then you collapsed on me.
In May, 14-year-old Sarah's CPR skills faced the ultimate test when her dad went into cardiac arrest.
I was doing the compressions. Yeah.
How long did it go on for?
Well, I had called 999 before I started, so I had to do it for 10 minutes before the ambulance came.
You saved his life?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that.
So how do you do it?
First thing you do, call 999. Next, we need to push hard and fast on the chest for 30 compressions at a rate about 2 per second. After we've done that, we need to tilt the head backwards, 2 fingers under the chin, 1 head on the forehead, and give 2 rescue breaths. And repeat the cycle until emergency services arrive.
Would you feel confident now to go out and do CPR on someone?
I think I would be able to do it.
Everyone has the tools, if they learn this, to save a life, but so many people don't know it.
Watch. Lock your fingers together, knuckles up, then push down, right on the sovereign.
Actor Vinnie Jones led the last high-profile campaign. The British Heart Foundation now wants CPR taught in all schools. What knowledge is there more important than how to save someone's life? Olivia Kinsley, 5 News.
It's reported that the wife of Eric Morecambe had her home broken into as she attended the unveiling of a statue of him and Ernie Wise last week. Joan Bartholomew, who's seen here in the middle, had travelled to Blackpool for the event on Friday. It said that burglars took items of jewellery, including rings and watches, from her home in Hertfordshire. Britain's Olympic and Paralympic stars have been given another hero's welcome on the final stage of their victory tour. Team GB and Paralympics GB emerged into the autumn sunshine to see thousands of fans in Trafalgar Square before lining up for a special photo to show off some of their combined 214 medals from Rio. They're now heading to Buckingham Palace for a reception with the Queen. And finally, when 87-year-old Doreen Mann found herself unable to get out of her bath, she feared the worst. No one could hear her shouts for help, and she couldn't get to the phone to answer calls or make one herself. She was trapped for 4 days, but then a waitress at her favourite cafe became concerned that she hadn't been in and ended up saving her life. Minnie Stevenson takes up the story.
I mean, at the time, I had to accept it. Thank goodness I didn't get in a turmoil.
With badly bruised knees, 87-year-old Doreen Mann found herself unable to move and stranded in her bath for 4 long days. Living alone, she shouted for help, but no one came.
And I went to turn over to get on my knees to get out, and I couldn't. I tried and tried, and in the end, my knees were so sore I couldn't do it anymore, so I just sat there.
Only a few miles down the road, though, luckily, someone was thinking of Doreen. Sonia Congrave, the waitress at a local cafe, became worried they hadn't seen or heard from their most loyal customer for days.
Now, this is Doreen's favourite restaurant, Tomasi's in Southend. She always sits in this part of the restaurant, and she comes 3 times a week. But when she didn't show up on Wednesday, staff here knew something wasn't quite right.
So Sonia called the police and raised the alarm. Officers found Doreen, who had only survived by living off the tap water. Sonia said it was one of the best decisions she's ever made.
People don't take any interest in other people anymore. They're so wrapped up in their own world that they don't take the time to stop and care for people, and I think this is just important. She's an amazing lady, yeah, and I'm glad to have met her.
She's my stepdaughter now. She's smashing.
The pensioner says she simply would not be here without Sonia and the staff at the cafe, who she now calls her second family. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
That's just about it for now. I'll be back though at 6:30 with 5 News Tonight, and we'll have more on the NHS Trust that's been criticised over killings by mental health patients. Julian Hendy's dad, Philip, was fatally stabbed in 2007 by a man who was well known to his local mental health services, and he had a history of violence as well. We'll hear from Julian about his tragic experience. We'll also have more on Melania Trump's decision to stand by her man after a series of sexual assault allegations against her husband. Will it turn around the Donald's fortunes? Not long till we find out. Sean Welby has got the weather next. I'll see you again, of course, at 6:30. Thanks for your company for now. Bye-bye.